This is, of course, the second part of this webinar that we've been doing. The first part, we made it as far working with the physical practice part of your program. We made it as far as the end of the lower body complexity. So unless there's any questions about that specifically later, we won't revisit anything in particular from that. We'll continue going forward, which means we'll be starting from the large frame mobility part of the program. I tend to take a lot of time to explain stuff just because it's just the way I am, sorry. And if we have some time remaining, we will also look at some of the elements of the morning practice as well. A couple elements are also in the main programming, and we'll look at that too. Yeah, so Neil's just commented that he found the QDR movement, the Quai des Hens, quite difficult. One thing I'll quickly mention with that, as well as all the other movements that are perhaps more, let's say, technical, this is why it's practice, right? This is why it's the idea of a physical practice as part of what you may call a wider movement practice. That's a personal perspective. I call it a movement practice for me. People might call it different stuff. People might not even recognize it as part of a wider practice. But this is something that I also wrote about in the beginning under the perspective of practice, because in many cases, if we're working physically, we have this culture of exercise and fitness and things like this, which is historical. It's not a given phenomenon. It's not that, for example, oh, I want to move, this is the way that I do it. It's not. It's an historical phenomenon which has, for example, it comes from the old school calisthenics, gymnastics influences, bodybuilding, modern strength and conditioning, which actually comes more from the 80s, the idea of functional training, which comes from mid-80s as well. So the idea that you're practicing something does not always come into people's cosmovision of physical practice, unless you're someone who works in an athletic field where you're practicing to get better, or you're a climber and you want to climb a more difficult route. This is more the perspective of practice that we try to promote. So of course, something like a skill, such as the Quai des Hens, don't expect to get it first time, not second time, not third time. Just remember, the last time you learned something that gave value to you, did you learn it immediately? Did you learn anything, immediately? Never happens. So this is the idea of physical practice. I'll just say one more word on the idea of physical practice before we get into the large frame mobility, which is also that because you're practicing, you can't really be wrong or right. You can just be more accurate or less accurate in accordance with a model that is given. And as I said last time, the models of these movements that are given are essentially the video resources that you see. So this calls upon you to either use some certain skills or to develop skills, which has been called by a teacher of mine, the mimic, which is very often a lost skill. The idea that you just look at something and go, okay, I have to figure out how to do that now, and not have someone stand next to you and give you an instruction sheet and a manual for your body. So in some cases, people might look at the progressions in the videos and think, wow, like I need more information. No, you don't. It's right there. You can see it. It just takes practice. If you look at ideas of, for example, tribal dance, from what I understand as well, for example, the early days of capoeira, before it was an institutionalized practice. There was a circle. There's someone doing some movements in the middle of the circle. Get your ass in that circle. Either, go with the flow, copy what they're doing, or don't get hit in the face by a foot. And so you had to adjust to this, and you had to learn through what? Through movement. And this is where it comes, for me, of being so important, because learning is necessarily, it requires movement. You have to move in order to learn, whether it's the movement of your eyes scanning across a page, or the neurons firing in your brain, making connections or unmaking connections, learning and unlearning. This is the perspective of the physical practice we have, even though essentially, it's a program on a piece of paper. It's a program on a piece of paper. So the perspective depends on you, your responsibility. Yeah, cool. Before we jump into the lower body complexity, any burning questions that anyone really needs to ask related to the programming? No? Good. Okay, and everyone can hear me okay? No problems? Yeah, thumbs up. Awesome. Nice. So we'll go straight in. Large frame mobility. What is large frame mobility? Yeah, another fancy name like lower body complexity. So large frame mobility, of course, it has to be in contrast to another concept, which is small frame mobility. These concepts are never fixed. You have an idea and you put a construct on top of it, an idea, and the idea or the perspective is one that I call large frame mobility. Large frame mobility is essentially when we're dealing with big global positions of the body. So for example, this is not really large frame mobility. This is a small frame. So the wrist work that we do, especially the spinal work, we're dealing with the vertebrae, the movement is very minimal, but it can be mobilized and become more mobile through practice. Large frame mobility, we start to look at the global spine, bending and turning in different directions. We start to look at, for example, the legs in global positions, large mobility, as opposed to looking at smaller things. It becomes quite clear quite immediately that, this is not a cut and dry thing. I can't really say, oh no, what about the neck? Because the neck is part of the spine, but then it's a specific, so it's not cut and dry, nothing ever is. We just make do with what we can. One of the things we start off with straight away is the high bridge rotation. And I want to give a couple words about the high bridge rotation first. The high bridge rotation, first of all, was introduced to me through the work of Ido Portal, who put out some fantastic resources that are very popular, and rightly so, that go through certain progressions relating to what he calls the art of floreio. Floreio is, excuse my Portuguese, but I believe it means flower in Portuguese. And it's essentially the nice, beautiful, flowery part of capoeira, which is often done alone by yourself, as opposed to the more combative type of elements that are a heart of the game as well. So these movements come from this tradition, but it does not mean that we cannot use them in our practice. We use them with respect, but also we can take things, nothing innately belongs to anything. Movement is completely contextual, and it depends upon the person and the context in which it's being used. High bridge rotation, we start to deal with global movement of the spine. And the reason I like high bridge rotation so much is, first of all, it's so progressive. You can progress from, I've given this movement to many, many different people from many different walks of life with different restrictions and availabilities. And I myself have been using variations of these movement for many, many years. And you can see the progression, although it happens slowly. And because it's not so much a skill, for example, such as a handstand, which really requires you to figure some stuff out, the high bridge rotation over time, if you're practicing, your body will give you the range for it to be available. I'll speak about this a bit later. Mobility as the idea of creating an adaptation, but in order to create an adaptation, you have to create a demand for that adaptation first of all. And this is what is in your practice. So with high bridge, the other thing that's really beautiful about it that you will not see yet in this programming is how it's connected with some other movements, which start to think more about the movement of the body in space. So just quickly, just to show you essentially what a high bridge rotation is. I start in the squat and I finish in the squat. Hugely important. You must start and you must finish in the squat. Again, this is clearly in the video resource, but the amount of times I've received submissions where people aren't going in and out of the squat, it's interesting. So I'll just show you the movement at the moment from the side. It's rotational. I'm turning in. I place my hand somewhere on the floor behind me. We'll get into more details. I'm looking at the hand, and you can see my body is now facing towards you, and I bring myself back. I come back to the other side. I rotate, and I repeat. Now, this movement is rotational. However, the first progression that's given is called posting, and posting is a little different. Posting is going overhead. I place back, I look at the hand, and I just lift the hips as high as possible, pushing through the shoulder to stabilize, and I come straight back down. So this is posting. Check the difference. Posting, I just go straight overhead. But then if I go in for the rotational bridge, I rotate around this way. I rotate in this direction. And the texture, this is what I wanted to bring to the forefront, is the texture of this movement. You know, what is he talking about now, the texture? The texture basically means, you know, what is it made out of and where is it going? So the texture of this movement is rotational. I'm turning. I feel this kinetic energy that's being produced. And the reason it can link with other movements is because rotations are all over the body. Circles, we work with circles in the body. It takes us somewhere. So although at the moment it's a very isolated movement, it is designed to lead to very many places. Now, the progressions that have been given with this high bridge rotation follow very much in the same as Ido Portal set out his progressions as well. But I just want to give a few more insights that I found personally useful in learning this movement. First of all, is on a kind of a biomechanical level, if you suffer from issues such as unstable spine in any places, by which I essentially mean that you feel it's just, you get maybe some pinching in the back when doing this movement, you essentially just reduce it. Reduce, reduce, reduce. What do I mean? You start in the squat. Even if you're not able to sit in a flat foot squat, you start from here. You just bring the hand back and you just bring your hips up just like this. Yeah. This is very similar, as you see already, to the unilateral, the bilateral bridge holding that we were doing. But you would just come up, entering and exiting. So this would be like a really restricted version. You just bring yourself up. We don't worry so much about the directions and things like that. We just start to work with opening the spine into global extension. Leg positioning. This is also something that's very, very useful because when manipulating your structure, your body will always try to take the easiest route. And this is really, really useful sometimes. In most cases, when we're dealing with movement as a subject for me, and moving through space, we ultimately want to be as efficient as possible. But there's two things that I want to bring to the forefront with that I mentioned before. The first thing is that efficiency doesn't really breed a good training effect. For example, something like the lizard crawl, another very popular movement. In the beginning, when I'm working with this movement, I remember this. It's so hard. You're crumbling to the floor, struggling to make it. And you think, man, what use is this movement? Like, it's not efficient. In the beginning, it's not efficient. And you get the benefit of the training effect because it's inefficient. When it becomes efficient, such as the quai de hands, such as the bridge rotation, when it becomes efficient, the training effect is no longer there. It subsides, and you need something else if you want to train and develop that particular portion of your movement. But ultimately, we want it to be efficient. So with the bridge rotation in the beginning, especially if you're at this point, just before starting to turn, things start to get really, really tight. Start digging a bit deeper. What do I mean? I mean, don't be scared to try and go for the next progression as long as there's no pain and issues in the spine. Stay tight in your abdominals, pulling them in. And as I mentioned with the leg position, where possible, keep the feet more or less straight ahead, or if they do point outwards, it's best no more than 15 degrees. And now, I don't want to get too tech on this, like it's a front squat or a back squat or something like this, but here's the reason why. If your feet are fully pointed out, more than 45 degrees, I mean, beyond the ideas of if it's good or bad to the knees, I'm not really concerned with that. I'm concerned with the stability of the structure. And if you watch, if I have my feet very turned out here, what normally happens is valgus, the knees go in. Again, this is not a bad thing per se, depends on the context. But in the context of my high bridge, what happens now? I get a very wobbly high bridge. And if anything, we want this movement to be very sturdy so we can just call upon it and then we can move and go somewhere. This is, of course, the future. So we lay the foundations for this first of all. Keep the feet more or less at 15 degrees. When you turn into it, also try to get into the habit of not compromising your structure too much. What do I mean? Example one, I turn into it, what happens? The rest of my body follows. This is compromising your structure again. It's nicer if you can work to just working here and bringing it straight up, as opposed to having this knee drop in and then come out. Again, we're building a pattern here, and the pattern takes time. The next step, once you've worked, for example, through the posting, I spent a lot of time with the very first progression because it can be a very beautiful movement as well. There's also that, you know, I just want to get there. I want to get the finger touch down. I want to get the full bridge rotation. If you're practicing, it will come. Yeah, this is guaranteed. This is the thing that's guaranteed. Unless you have a physiological blockage, which is not very common, but unless you have a real physiological blockage, something in the spine, something in the knees, or issues with the squat, it will develop over time, whether that's months or years. If you're interested in learning the movement, who really cares? Yeah? How long do you want to practice for? Months or for the rest of your life? So this movement, when you start thinking about the rotational element, so what I mean is we've got to this progression here. I just placed my hand down, I got here, cool, happy days, but there's a problem. I can't really go any further, and if I do, my arm starts to feel really twisted and weird, and I'm not sure why. In the video, you'll see the action of the hand. And why is this important? Because it's quite universal when we're dealing with rotation on the hand. There's this part, the corner here, which is the pisiform. It's on the corner of the hand here. It's actually very, very strong. And if you have good wrist mobility, if it comes towards 90 degrees, it means that actually on this part, you can rest your body weight, and it's just a very, very stable structure. It's bone to bone, essentially. This is the part that we're turning on. So if you watch on the floor here, this is in the video as well, my hand is going to be moving like this in order to facilitate the rotation of the bridge. It requires me to lift my fingers, and I also have type of a cup in my hand. I use a cupping hand motion like this rather than just having the fingers out anywhere. So in kind of a close-up action shot, I'm coming down into the bridge rotation. I place my hand, and when I want to rotate here, I'm stuck. But if I let the fingers up, now it comes around, okay? And likewise, when I come back, when I go and I do the full bridge rotation, the fingers will actually come all the way around, all the way around. I always look at the hand, always look at the hand. It comes around until the other hand is placed. And then I come back around again. And this idea of looking at the hand and where it's placed is universal in all the rotational progressions. The first progression, the overhead reach, you just look overhead. Another issue that often pops up with people doing the high bridge and why it's not quite, I would say not quite full range, is, again, this is a very common thing. People will place their hand behind them, but they don't look at the hand on the floor. They just go here, they kind of look at this here, and they go there, okay? So if you watch the difference in the texture of the movement, so this one is without looking at the floor. I just kind of come around here and come back. Okay, it seems like I'm doing a nice bridge rotation, but actually I'm just kind of reaching and posting overhead. What we're looking for is a different texture. Looking, following, bang, that's where it is. Not only does this give a more fuller range of the spine, which gives certain physiological adaptations as well as an aesthetic element, it also opens up more the perspective of the rotational element that carries into many other movements that you would see if you start putting pieces together from the program. And I'll speak about it later, but future parts of the program if I decide to create them. Good. Now, high bridge, we've got here 6 reps each side. You can take, it depends, if you're working with conditioning, you can take it up to 12 each side. This is very, very demanding, 12 repetitions each side. I would not recommend you going this high if you don't feel stable in your progression, if you have any niggles in the spine or things like this. You don't need to. I essentially put down what I consider a minimum for practice of the movement. As we know, repetition is the mother of learning. But at the same time, there is a maximum and a minimum that we want to work with. So this is left to you. If you want to increase those repetitions, you can do. My personal advice is to keep it just to 6 or 8 repetitions each side and make progressing through the progressions your priority, rather than just increasing progressions for conditioning, unless you have a specific reason to do so. If you're already doing the full bridge rotations and you're just doing 6 each side, yeah, jack up the reps a little bit and you can bring in some more conditioning. But for example, if you're just working with posting and you're in 6 reps is no problem each side, go to the next progression. I said this before, although we have to be mindful that we're not overstretching ourselves. This means both, physically as well as psychologically, really trying to take it to a place that we're not familiar with. Also, you need to manage that with not holding yourself back. At some point, you have to jump. And I remember each of these moments when I took the jump, and sometimes I fell hard. Sometimes I took the jump and I realized, wow, it was there all along. I've already been ready. I was able to do this 1 month ago, but I just didn't take the jump. So this is why I say that this physical practice is about highlighting and developing, highlighting your restrictions, but also your potentials as well. Because just as we may not realize, wow, my spine is really locked up, or, my hips, I didn't realize in this position it's so tight. You will also find stuff like, wow, I didn't realize I could do this. There's 2 sides of the exploration element. Sometimes you find things that you didn't realize that were there and restrictions. Sometimes you find things you didn't realize were there and they are potentials. The underlying concept is the same. Explore. Good. Last thing I'll say about high bridge rotation before checking with any questions is hand positioning and distance. Again, this is something very, very familiar that I see that often is suboptimal for progression of the movement. So the first thing is, as we know, everyone has a different shaped body. Everyone is different. And especially everyone that is taller, shorter, wider, narrower, whatever it is, it requires you to develop your personal understanding of your structure. This is why I don't say to people, when they say, where do you put the hand? Oh, it has to be, 25% of the length of your femur plus the width of your wrist, this is not required. All I want you to understand is that the hand needs to be in a comfortable position for your structure to get the movement done. And you'll only learn if it's optimal or comfortable or not if you try different positions. For example, position 1, I turn around, I just place my hand wherever here, and now I can't even get my hips up because my space is too narrow. The other choice, when I go in, I come back here, now I can do the movement, but it makes, when I come back, try coming back to the squat from there. It's very, very difficult. It's always a negotiation. And in general, for most people in learning this movement, I will always say you need to reach further than you think. More common is people placing their hand too close and just not having enough space for themselves. So it requires you to reach, 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 reach. Now I have some nice space for the movement. Because one key thing, the heels do not come off the floor. The feet stay flat. There's a reason for this. It's because this is a different type of bridge. This low bridge is something else. We won't get into it. It will maybe feature in a future program. But we want to distinguish between these two movements. So the feet stay flat on the floor. As you see now, this can be restricted by your squat mobility. This is why we have a lot of squat movements, which we'll get through in a moment. If you really cannot keep the feet on the floor, of course, absolutely fine, but it is a priority. Just keep it in mind. One more thing. I always add one more thing, yeah? One more thing, yeah? This is important. This is, again, about the texture of the movement. And as you can see, I'm in love with this movement, the high bridge. I once said to one of my friends, who's a very well-trained person, but he didn't have the mobility for a high bridge. And I was speaking with another friend who is a great capoeirista, or was more accurately. And we both agreed that, if you have a high bridge rotation or a good progression for a high bridge rotation, it opens up so many great possibilities, not only in your movement, but psychologically, to know that this backwards reality is available to you. You don't have to do backflips and stuff like this unless you really want to, but just to have this idea that, well, it's all upside down. It's the other way around. This is cool, yeah? You see the world from a different perspective. So another element about the texture of the movement, it's very soft. It's firm, but it's soft. It has quality, it's control. This is what we aim for. This is the model. This is the intention that I spoke about. So how does this translate physiologically? It basically means stuff like this. We try to cut that out, yeah? If you want to be like the cat, you have to try and act like the cat. Yeah. So when I turn around, I'll do this in kind of a restricted form, just so like if I am here and I'm a bit restricted, you can see I try not to take multiple steps, but if I have to take multiple steps with the hand, I do it. I inch here, I get my position, I bring myself up, I drop, and I try not to, yeah, I come here and I reach, I open, I get to the fingertips, counterbalance, I pull myself forward, I go back in for the next one, I inch my way back so that eventually, when it's available to me, I just ease my way in and out, preferably without a sound. And when I promote this texture in all my movement, it will affect all my movement. And it is very much a psychological thing. I was reading a great book, I think maybe it's in the program, by Norman Doidge called The Brain That Changes Itself. It's a book on neuroplasticity, which is really, really great. But he speaks about his father. And he observed his father when his father was moving. And he said everything his father did just seemed so difficult. Like his father wasn't that old. His father was, mid-60s or something, towards 70s, but he didn't have any major problems or injuries. But one thing he noticed, every time his father would get out of the chair, yeah, we all know this, right? Of course, if you make this sound, it's difficult. Of course it is. So he advised his dad, he tried to, because of course he's into developing neuroplastic change, and this is a behavior. This is a thing. It's a behavior. You can change your behavior. So he started with a verbal cue. He said to his father, every time you get out of this chair, first thing I want you to say to yourself is, piece of cake, and get up. That's it. Piece of cake, get up. And he said every time after that, his dad would just go, piece of cake, and get up. So this is the same thing that even if it's still difficult, you fake it. I've said it already, fake it. It's very popular because it's true. You fake that it's easy. You put a smile on your face. You pretend that you're a cat. You dig deeply into the movement. And you really try to stick to these cues that I've given. Because again, this is the model. And in all honesty, if we don't respect the model, the thing that we're trying to practice and learn, first of all, you're not being a very good practitioner for yourself. It's like, for example, if you want to learn the guitar and then you're like, nah, I won't learn that scale. I'll learn the songs, but I won't learn the scales and I won't learn the chords. Of course you can do it this way. But if you have an understanding and you stick to a model of certain chords and certain scales that you can use, further down the line, you see the difference in quality between the two musicians. So stick to these ideas. Make sure that you record yourself, review yourself. This is part of your practice as well. A lot to say on the high bridge because I love it. Any questions about high bridge? Anyone who's tried it already that has any issues? If you do, I'll give you a couple moments and you can just turn your microphone off and on and just let me know. All right, good, awesome, cool. So the next important thing that we move on to, which as you can see now, we've worked with global extension of the spine through this movement frame. Now we're going to work with global flexion of the spine. And the movement I chose for global flexion is a circle of the neck or circle of the shoulders. This begins very, very simply that for some people, the very first progression may be more than enough. I believe in the morning practice, we have back roll neck loading. If you really have problems with this next movement and the progressions, you just do the back roll neck loading for the minute. This will be very, very great. It's a loaded stretch already. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, the back roll neck loading is essentially, you can use your hands to support yourself. Here's step one. This is what you're going to do for step one, yeah? The hands can help you, anything you like, and you bring the legs up. The next progression, where you want to bring yourself, is to be able to bring the feet to the floor, okay? If you cannot get the feet to the floor at the moment, you have to make an educated decision for yourself, whether you just need to spend more time first with this loaded stretch, just back rolling, or whether you start with the progressions for the circles in the video. I have to leave that with you. Please keep in the idea with this movement that when we're dealing with the spine here, we're really talking about cervical all the way down to your sacrum. So what you'll find many times in the morning, especially, this will tell you the quality of your mattress on what you sleep on relative to your body. You may find yourself so tight in this position, all the way to the base of the cervical spine up here. So this is why I start to encourage neck loading, or shoulder. You start with shoulder. So here's the definition. Here for me, I'm not actually really loading any of my neck. My neck's completely free to move. So what I'm looking for is that you can get yourself higher, higher, higher. Even if my feet don't go to the floor yet, I try to bring myself to the shoulders. So I'm getting some action and some loading for the neck. Of course, don't push this too crazy, but it is a loaded stretch, which means I've got a body weight load on top of me, okay? This movement in itself is very, very effective. This is why you'll see many yogis who are very flexible in this position, because it's part of their practice, yeah? So from here, if I can get the toes to the floor, perfect. What I start to do now, this is for the neck loading, is I start to manipulate myself side to side. Because remember, we're not just looking for a beautiful position. I want to be able to move in this position. So what I'm doing here now
Yeah, I just start to move myself from side to side. If I don't have both feet on the floor, I can hold here and just tap, 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 tap.
Watch the neck throughout this movement. Now, this movement is developing the global flexion of the spine, but it is also designed to develop the intelligence of your neck. The intelligence of your neck. And with that, of course, the head, because it's the open chain portion of it. So what does this mean? It basically means, this is a back roll movement, which means at some point I want to be able to use it to move backwards, to roll backwards. And it's not ideal, especially if you start working with things like concrete outside, to roll over the back of your head. So what we want is to develop a built-in understanding of, if I roll backwards, my head has to move. So for example, here, it's not a good idea that I put my head here. I want to put my head here, the other side, and it gives me the availability to roll over the shoulder. So this is something else that the progressions of this movement will teach you. And it's even in the first idea of the neck loading. So as I mentioned, even if you're just doing the neck loading, if I shift to one side, the head goes the other side. Shift to one side. To make things easier, ideally you want to develop the sensation of this, but if you need a verbal cue, always look to the foot that's on the floor. Look to the foot that's on the floor, and that will give you the space. Very often people will look the other side. But a visual cue, just look at the foot on the floor. And now I'm developing the intelligence of my head or my neck to move out of the way when I'm going over the shoulder. So that's nice. We got through the neck loading progression as well. When we start going into the circles of the neck, it's essentially a progressive movement to start looking forward. What does that mean? It basically means my first progression, I first just want to be able to lift my legs and touch the floor. As I mentioned in the beginning, when things are not so efficient, you have an opportunity. Yeah? It's not, this is difficult, I can't do it. No, this is difficult, opportunity, training time. Yeah? So it means from the beginning progression, this is why I added the leg lift. Because ultimately, I want to be able to just, there's a small contraction of the abdominals. It just comes up. I don't want to have to swing myself into it. So we work basically with the leg lift just to condition the front folding, the active front folding. I pull myself to here. When I need it, I use the hands. So remember this with the neck rolling progressions would be the first progression, just bringing the legs up and down. If you want more intensity, you can of course work with the straight leg. It's not so important, but you can work with that as well. Now, if I want to start progressing to the neck circles, I first turn the head. One side, I bring it down, I bring it up again, and then I turn the head again to the other side to look at the feet. Start feeling the load come onto the shoulders. If you feel the load all over your neck and on your head, this is a good sign that it's not the best position. It means you should adjust and start to feel the load coming onto the shoulders. As I come back down, I come into the next rep, I just turn. It's just a head turn. The development, the progression that you want to get yourselves to is when I'm here, and then I can look towards the front. So that's better viewed from the top view. I come down here, I use the arms to stabilize against the floor, and hello, I can see you just here, okay? I come down, next repetition, keep it tight, use the hands to assist. I turn, pull, 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 and I look the other direction down here, okay? As you can see, it looks a bit uncomfortable for the neck, and in the beginning, it most certainly is. It most certainly is. Which again means that you have to monitor your own sensations in your body, distinguish between what is discomfort, what is pain, You may know this from certain injury history. If you've had neck injuries in the past, that you have to be mindful of this. And this idea of management of injury and symptoms is written briefly here, just to give yourself some information. Ultimately, where we want to take this movement is that when I come through here, I move the head, first progression. Second progression, I look, I look, make sure I can see the front. I want to see something, okay? And then I come back. I'll come back up and I do the other side. That's one of the progressions. I turn, I look at the front. But ultimately, we want to take this baby all the way around. Here, the weight comes to the shoulder. I look through. I open the chest into the floor. And I reverse. I pull it back under. The feet are sliding forwards and backwards. I come back down. And I go back in for the next rep, the other side. I pull through. First, look to the front. You see that I'm staying high. If you need to make adjustments here, no worries. I open the chest and then onto the shoulders here. Now, I'll show it more clearly in a moment, but what we're doing here, the reason why it's called the circle of the shoulders is because we're mapping a circle of the body that we can use that's available, which comes across here. We also have a circle that we can use around here, higher up. But we're working, that's why it's circle of the neck stroke shoulders. What does this mean? It means, for example, if you look here, there's also a circle of the wrist. It's a circle of the wrist. A circle of the elbow. We have circles of the feet. We have circles, I can do a circle of my hips here. And now, when you map all of these ideas, when you can map these different circles, what do we know about a circle historically? What has helped us achieve? A circle is a wheel. A circle is a wheel. A circle drives something. A circle promotes movement. These circles are everywhere in our body. So this is what we're just trying to develop here. It's the early stages, so we just work with the circle of the shoulders. When you start progressing with this movement, you start to try to make it a little bit more, I say strict, but this is essentially what I mean. That when you're pulling yourself into the movement, I've already mentioned, not too much ballistic action. So there's a high tendency for people to really pull up. If you have to use speed and power to get you into a position, it tells you essentially that something's missing in that part. And unless you slow it down, you will not find exactly what that is. Whether it's that it's some abdominal strength missing, whether it's just your structure is not optimal, whatever it is, you will not notice that unless you slow it down. So if there is a problem that you're really whipping the knees up, you may find that all you need to do is just keep the knees bent. Do it with the knees bent and pull up with the knees bent and use the hands to help. Absolutely fine. So pull myself up here. I'm able to get to the floor. I'm working on my full rotation. I got the head turn. I try to look to the front. Ah, I got it. Awesome. I come across to the front of the chest. I pull the neck back in. And one of the final progressions, I keep going. I keep going. I keep going. I put it under. And I work my reps in this fashion. When I come back, it just comes back the other direction. And when you start developing towards this area, again, I was talking about keeping things strict. Make sure that your feet are tracking back and forward on the same line. What does this mean? I can view you from, I'll show you just from the top here. When I bring myself here, there is a tendency that although we want to negotiate the neck and the upper torso mainly, people start to negotiate the feet more. What does that mean? They come here and the feet start to move. It kind of does all this type of stuff. And the next thing you know, you do your movement, and now for some reason I'm facing the other way. This will happen in the beginning, no worries. But as I said, keep that model in mind, that what we want is ultimately, when I'm working this movement, even if it's just here,
the feet stay planted where they are. And even if they do move, I pull it in and then out. In, always tracking on the same line, and then out. I might travel along the floor a bit and backwards, but we don't want so much of this side-to-side uncontrolled movement. I remember when I first did this movement some years ago, maybe it's only about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was in a capoeira studio, and they had this type of floor here. And I remember I was doing just the neck roll, and I thought, I think you can pull the head all the way around. I remember when I did it, and I recorded myself, and I was all over the floor. And afterwards, the next day, I was like, oh man, this is tight. Nothing broken, but I jumped straight in there. So I'm just trying to get the point across that if you're trying to progress with this movement, it can be very, very tough. Ultimately, it will provide you with large frame mobility and improve your general front folding, so your posterior chain mobility. But it also creates some great opportunities. For example, if you then have a soft floor, or hardwood floor, like wood. I'll just do a few floor type movements just so you can see how this availability of the neck further down the line can create opportunities. So for example, here, let's say, for example, I just start with my hybrid rotation. I do my hybrid rotation. I come down. I use this rotational element. I'm on the neck. And I come back down. I choose to roll forward. It goes on the neck as well. I come back down. I come back in. I go into my hybrid. Instead of going over the neck, I just come over the shoulder. I want to come back. I slip. I pull it back. So again, this is the general theme of this whole practice. These types of movements here, yeah, they're exercises if you just use them as exercises. But if you're practicing a pattern, at some point further down the line, you will have more movement potential. This is up to you. Like if you want to use it just to exercise and just feel good, this is not a problem. If you want to progress into the idea of how these movements connect together, this is also available to you. And the, I'm saying in English, the savvy of you will have noticed that in many of these videos, there are extra movements in there that are not featured in the programming. If you're interested, I encourage you to explore these ideas as well. That was the long and the short of the circles of the neck. Any questions about circling the neck? All good? Nice, okay, cool. Now we get to the big boy, the pancake. Pancakes, anyone? This is very often I say, pancakes, anyone? Everyone goes, yeah. And then we do pancakes and they're like, no. It's not that bad, because the reason pancakes are not that bad is because it's completely progressive to you. And when a movement is progressive to your current level of mobility, doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you've been doing pancakes for your first time ever, or if you've been doing the pancake like me for a good 10 years. It never gets easier. It should never get easier. It's an effective, potent mobility tool. It does the job for anyone, no matter your level. So this is one thing that I want to get across. When you're using tools such as this, the pancake, it should never get easier if you're always looking to progress with it. If you just want to maintain, you don't necessarily have to do the pancake. You can just move through your motions. And we'll get more into this a bit later with regards to what I actually believe is the best way to develop your mobility, which many people often surprised at. In any case, the pancake as a position, the reason it's called the pancake is because essentially you want to at some point be as flat as a pancake on the floor. Yeah. So we're dealing here with front folding, which is in a hinging as well. Now, there's many different progressions for this movement. One of them, the main things we use is elevation. The elevation will make the angle at which you're working more favorable so you can get the most out of the movement. So I'll show you first of all with some elevation. So the elevation I choose here is a step. So if you're super restricted, now how can you tell if you're super restricted in this position?
Well, the first things first, check yourself on the floor. Now, in order to make this movement effective, one thing first has to ring true. When I try to straighten my spine, it doesn't have to be super straight. This is something later. It can be a little bit rounded, but if you cannot get your shoulders in front of your, basically in between your legs, if it can't come in front, then you're not going to get much benefit from doing this movement on the floor. You need to find yourself, first of all, in a position that when you're just sitting here, this is a perfect position to start from. It's not a huge angle that I have. I don't need to be here. If you're here with elevation, you're too high. Like here, I should then be here on the floor. This would be better. So, but if I'm here and I can't reach for the love of life, I bring myself up here on some elevation. I may even need to use something much higher. When it gets too high, this movement starts to become ineffective. Now, there's a certain, again, a texture to this movement. You know, in the video resource, it just looks like, you know, he's bouncing forward and backwards. It's a technique I just call pulsing, but the pulsing that I use, again, I said it has a specific texture. What is the texture? It's actually a pull-push. Pull-push, 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 pull-push. This is the texture we're looking for. Why? Because essentially here, let's say, you know, I'm fine with my hands on the surface, so I decide to bring my hands to the front. This increases the load up here. Another option, if you really want to increase the load, is to bring the arms to the side or the arms to the top here. These are different ways to increase the load. Now, keep the knees locked. You can use both variations with feet up and feet pointed. Two different textures. There is no wrong and right, but do the variation that's the most difficult, of course, okay? So let's say, for example, I'm working with feet facing up. I believe there's more of effect into the calf muscles and things like this. Doesn't really matter, in all honesty. I'm working from here. I pull. I try to imagine pulling my feet towards me, and then when I get to the bottom, I give it a little push off the floor. But it stays in the end range. So here's what it looks like. Pull, push, pull, push, pull, push. Here's squeezing. Pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push. And I stay in my end range. This is super important as well. For me personally, I don't really promote people to do this movement like this, like all the way up, all the way down. Why? Because then it becomes more of a lower back loaded movement. And I'm not loading the lower back. I'm not working the lower back. I have different tools for this that are much more effective than doing a pancake. A pancake is used in order to develop the usable range in the end range of your posterior chain, here mostly relating to the hamstrings and you know, more in the lower portion of your body. So working with this movement, I believe in the beginning we have 30 pulses and we hold the last for 30 seconds. If you're new to this movement and have never done it before, I advise you just to go with 15. Start with 15. The reason for this is because you may have heard, you know, back in the certain training circles, a friend of mine recently, she came from a place like this, and they said, we don't do any of this, you know, bouncing stuff. Actually, a friend who's studying gymnastics, and the teacher said, you know, we don't do this type of stuff, like this pulsing ballistic stuff. You know, yeah, and a child shouldn't use a power drill. But if you're educated on how to use a power drill effectively, it's a very effective tool, but it can also kill you. Yeah. So you have to, again, educate yourself on the use of the tool. And the best thing for that in the beginning is using less repetitions just to check, is my system okay with this? Is this kind of ballistic pulsing a bit too much for me at the moment? If so, you start with 5 pulses and you hold it for 5 seconds and you do it 3 times. Like if you do damage to yourself doing just 15 reps with a 15-second hold, you were damaged in the beginning. It was not done by the movement. You're never injured by a movement unless it's a trauma that comes at you. This is injured by, you know, a movement happening. But if you're doing an exercise Like, for example, I think it was a few years ago in the CrossFit, they did box jumps back to back with like really heavy deadlifts, and box jumps, really heavy deadlifts. And I think they said like 6 athletes blew their Achilles heel. 6 athletes blew their Achilles heel. Well, I think this is, a case that there must have been some issues beforehand. Kelly Starrett was saying, I don't know if this is true or not, but a visualization that you can hang a car from the tendon of your Achilles heel if it's healthy. So the concept is that if you injure yourself with these types of movements, because they are potent, but this is why they work, this is why they deliver. If they're injured, it's normally a case that there was something pre-existing, so you have to manage that for yourself. Whether that means not doing the movement for a couple of weeks, or whether that means gradually progressing yourself higher. But for me, the 30-30 is the standard benchmark. I don't really go higher than that, whether I put weight on my back or not, which I'll show you in a moment. 30 pulses and a 30-second hold at the end is a good benchmark to be at, especially just with body weight. So we were working with elevation here. Now I'm going to give some tips for if you're working this progression on the floor. And the first thing that I would tend to is the idea of the back position. Now, many people will say, two camps. One camp is, unless, this pancake is perfectly flat and you have a perfectly, neutral spine, if not some anterior tilt. If not, you're cheating. Okay. The other camp will say this: well, I got my pancake to the floor. I got my pancake to the floor. Okay, so you're dealing with two camps here. And the middle ground is always best to navigate. Again, I would always say to people that if with a bit of rounding in the back, you can get more from this than from being elevated and being completely straight, if you feel you're getting more from the floor with a bit of a rounding, this is okay, absolutely fine. But just keep in mind that the general model is we work with a neutral spine. Now, I say neutral spine because actually, I am anterior tilting in order to maintain that spine, but actually the spine comes out neutral. It's not, for example, you will not achieve this position in a pancake. So even though I'm anteriorly tilting the pelvis, it comes out neutral in my spine. So the ideal model would then be here. But as I said, if you still feel you're getting a lot from the movement with slight rounding, not a problem at all. But gradiate yourself in progression towards the model we're looking for, which is the neutral spine. If you're working this movement with weight, I'll show you how I like the weight done. I'm just going to quickly grab a weight plate. And don't freak out. I do recommend that if you're doing this, if you have the facilities available, and as I said, you've done it a few times with body weight and there's no previous issues and conditions and it feels okay, I don't really care who you are. The 20K plate for this movement is your friend. And here is the thing. The more restricted you are, the heavier the weight you should use. Because a loaded stretch, I think of it more of as an assisted stretch. The load is helping me get into a position where I can work that I would not normally be able to get in with just my own body. And this is how I see loaded stretching. Yeah. So the load, it's not about, oh, I'm so strong, I can take so much load. It's like, no, your mobility is so bad, you really need something to push you down into there. It's not like a detriment. I'm not being like nasty or anything, but I just say, don't be afraid to use a heavy weight if you have one. If not, I'll show you an alternative. Now, the reason I prefer to use a plate like this instead of a long barbell, if you had one at home, is essentially because this you can manipulate in such a way that it facilitates the maintenance of a neutral lumbar spine. What the hell does that mean? It basically means if I bring this plate up here and I hold it just on the ridges on the side, again, this is not the position I'm looking for. I can use the plate to help me into the position I'm looking for. I let the plate go down low on my back, and as it comes down low, watch what happens to my spine. It comes down low, it comes down low, it comes down low. Hey presto, it just helped me maintain a good position for my spine
with my elbows high as well, which keeps my chest nice and open and facilitates a neutral spine. And now I can just work in the position here. And it's the same if you're elevated. If you're working like this, don't put it on the shoulders, because now you're facilitating actually, a thoracic rounding. We don't want flexion. We're looking for more extended spine to facilitate the stretch in the hamstrings. Now, again, if you're using, for example, a barbell, this is why I'm not such a fan of the barbell, because people hold the barbell here, and then it starts to pull the upper body down, and then they start to round in the back. If you do have a light dumbbell at home, you can use this in the same way. I'll just quickly grab a dumbbell. And any extra weight is going to facilitate this movement. And it won't necessarily be better than the body weight version. It will be different. And this is another thing. It's not always the case that if we do something weighted, it's better. No, it's a variation. There's very, very different texture if you're using weight assisted. If you've got a dumbbell here, you can actually place it more on the back of the neck, but still keep the elbows high. Because actually now I can make this weight feel heavier the further it is from my fulcrum, like the hinging point here. Sorry, not the fulcrum, the hinging point here. So if I have the weight here above the neck, one thing I can also do with a light dumbbell is just hold it here, like I'm giving someone a nice Easter present, presenting it in front of them. I can use this variation. This is just taking advantage of increasing the leverage and making it more difficult. One variation I sometimes do as well is just holding it to the front. All of these have different textures that you can use, so do explore them. But if you do have the heavy plate available, get on the heavy plate. The Pancake is one of those really, really nice large frame mobility movements that if you're practicing it frequently, it will make differences. I visited some places before and seen some people when they're doing Pancake, and they're like, they're here, which is a nice place to be. And then they said, yeah, you know what? Like a couple months ago, I couldn't even get my shoulders in front of my hips. This then brings us to the final point on the Pancake is how far does it go? This is completely up to you. All this stuff is completely up to you. If you want to just do the bridge rotations, just the posting, this is all I want to do, absolutely fine. You don't need to have a Pancake that goes down to the floor. I personally have it because it facilitates a lot of other movements for myself, such as my handstand work. It helps my handstand work. It also helps me move more along the floor. But this is stuff that I do. If you don't do that, then perhaps you don't need it. Very often people can just get stuck in like a movement. Now I really want to get my Pancake to the floor. I need to get chest to the floor. And what happens? You serve the movement. It doesn't serve you. Perhaps you're not even using it for anything. Oh, I want a really nice middle splits and front splits. Well, I would always ask the question, for what? What do you want it first of all? I need to save all my money and I really, really want to buy this car. Okay, well, what do you want it for first of all? Ask yourself perhaps this question. You may find that actually you don't need it and you can use that money on something else, or just like your training time. Maybe you don't need a split. Maybe you don't need a beautiful Pancake. You just want to have a bit more availability. Then perhaps you can use that extra time for something else that you're practicing. So always keep this in mind when we're looking, especially at large frame mobility. Large frame mobility isn't always that type of mobility that you have to have. I would say much more is better working with small frame mobility, making sure these small things all work, that the spine moves, that the hips feel good, even the toes and the ankles. And then if you have a use for that larger frame stuff, for example, if you dance, most certainly Pancake's going to be useful for you. I lied. One last thing I'm going to say, and this is just for the very, very flexible, very, very mobile people, especially if you come from a background which is more passive stretching based, for example, like yoga practices. Two things. Work this with weight. If you are very, very mobile and you can get like right down to the floor, work this movement with weight, because the amount of times I've seen people that are very, very mobile because of their movement practices, whether that is something like yoga or dance, and yet they have no strength at all in this position. I mean, how useful is that then in terms of movement? It's great for an Instagram picture, and it's great in order to,
to adhere to a picture of an asana in a book. But with regards to actually, being useful to you, this is something that you have to ask as well. And this then ties into something a bit more of a specific observation that I had a few years ago and developed on myself. Is very often, if you have a nice pancake, what you'll see is people, they have their pancake, you ask them to show you their pancake, because they're very, very mobile, and they go here, and they do the pancake here to the floor. Now, this is fantastic. Okay, you have a usable pancake. But this is a certain range. Pancake also works in this range. So we also want to have availability in this range, and also we want to have availability in Pancake in this range as well. And I would argue that you want to have, if you're in the advanced stages of developing your Pancake, you want to have the chest to floor availability, almost all the way through to like this kind of pike position. Why? Because when looking into the future, when looking again at the usability of your Pancake, we start to look at the world of straddle. Now, straddle is essentially just when you have your legs apart like this, okay? This is a straddle position, very common in gymnastics. And we want to start then thinking about, okay, what is the use of my Pancake? So one of the uses can be in a straddle hold. Now, if I'm holding a straddle, what position are my legs in? They are not out here like this. My legs are actually more at 45 degrees. So if you are working your Pancake with an eye towards it, helping things like a press handstand with it to be able to help your straddle hold, it's more valuable actually for you to start looking at this angle of your legs at 45 degrees. 90 degrees, I'm mixing up my degrees here, a 90-degree angle, rather than working at this, huge angle here. This is great for developing into your mid-splits work. You can kind of bridge the gap between mid-splits and Pancake. But if you're looking in order to use it in the world of straddle, which I think it's most usefully applied, start working at 45 degrees as well. If you're not there yet, just have fun with the pulsing. Yeah. Any questions regarding Pancake? Quick run through through the world of Pancake. All good? Nice, awesome. Good. So that's actually the main part of the large frame mobility. I'm going to go through two more elements of this. One is the floor calf pulses. Now, the floor calf pulses is one of these video resources that I gave you that has a lot of other material in there. And actually, it's under the heading of more head-to-toe tools. And if you're not familiar with head-to-toe is essentially, the mobility to touch your head to your toe in this direction. It relies on the dorsiflexion of your foot, like this. You don't need this much dorsiflexion. 90-degree dorsiflexion is, again, a good place to be. But if you're someone, for example, who cannot pull your foot towards you any more than this, and it doesn't go to 90, then this work with the calf pulses is going to be really, really good for you. If you're hugely restricted in the posterior chain from kind of hamstrings down, then you might want to take a look at some of the other tools in the video as well if you're looking for something extra. However, calf pulses, the reason I choose them is because they are very, very effective. They're very, very low intensity, which basically means it's not like so heavy and destructive for you. Like a Pancake, using, especially if you're using weight, if you're using a loaded Pancake, I don't recommend more than twice per week. And then the rest of the time do body weight type Pancake stuff. And so because this is completely body weight, the calf pulses, this is something that I personally, for at least a year, did every single morning. Calf pulses, I say 50 to 100. Someone asked me why recently, and it was quite funny because he asked me why and then told me that he had DOMS, so like muscle soreness, in his calves from doing it. I said, yeah, this is the point. Because in the beginning, if I give you 100 reps, your calves are going to hurt like hell the next day and you're never going to go back and use the tool. So as well, of course, the physiological damage that's done, of course, the micro tear to the fibers, and we're dealing with the ligaments quite strongly as well, so we have to be careful. But 50 repetitions, 50 pulses on each side is a great way to start. If it feels okay after a couple weeks, don't progress it any quicker than that. If it feels okay after a couple weeks, go to 75. Work 75 each leg for a couple of weeks, and if that feels okay, take it to 100, and I think 100's absolutely fine. I improved my dorsiflexion hugely working with just these 100 rep pulses. Again, what we're looking for is end range pulses. So what does it mean? I'll talk about the setup of the position more in a moment, but it means that I'm working always in the very end range. So it's not a calf raise. This is a mistake that's often made. It's not a calf raise. It's a calf pulse, which basically means I'm not really dealing with a concentric phase. The concentric phase is going to be when I'm kind of pushing up. And in actual fact, I'm not really dealing with an eccentric phase either. I'm working essentially with the elasticity of my connective tissue. And this is where some people freak out, like, oh, you don't want to bounce around in your connective tissue. It's like, well, yeah, you don't want to make that a daily habit, but your connective tissue is supposed to, it's there for that. It has an elasticity to it, and you can increase that elasticity. Now, this is something that Ido Portal said, what do you want to build yourself off? Your body will either lay down collagen or it will lay down elastin dependent upon your movement habits. What do you want? Body made of collagen or a body made of elastin? So we try to develop the elastin fibers here, and if anyone wants to take the science to me and say this is BS, perfect. But I don't really care, to be honest, because I use the movement and it's beneficial for me. I didn't injure myself. I've shared it with many other people. The science doesn't really concern me. It's the nature of the results of the movement. So this particular exercise, you have to adapt it in such a way that your heel is almost touching the floor, but not quite. So for example, if you can get yourself down to this particular area here, where you're just working, it's not quite touching the floor, and you're at full stretch, this is where you want to be working. This is the ideal position. So just taking a look at the calf as I'm working here, the position as I work with this movement, I'm in the complete end range. I cannot go any further. But again, it's a pull and a push. You can even see on the anterior side, when I'm pulling and pushing, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a flexion, 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 flexion. I pull down and I just small push out, so small that it's hardly an eccentric or a concentric phase. It's more on the connective tissue, as I said. Now, because everyone has different structures and different levels of mobility, again, in order to get the most out of this movement, you will have to adjust the shape of your form. And the best advice I can give is adjust your structure so that it just gives you the most stretch. So how would I adjust the structure? The structural adjustment happens when I increase or decrease the size of my form. So if I don't have much mobility, I may find just working here is absolutely fine, almost in like just a push-up position with my bum high. No problem. Yeah. If this is even a problem, you can have a raised surface. You can put your hand on the raised surface and just work like this. But remember, if your heel is touching the floor, then you're not getting the full range of the movement. So let's say I'm here. My heel is touching the floor. Okay, no good. I take the elevation away. I try here. My heel is still touching the floor. I have better dorsiflexion than I thought. So what I can do now, I extend the shape. I make it bigger. Now what happens? It means that I have to travel further into my end range to get that heel close to the floor, but not touch it. So this would be a progression, extending the distance of the hands and the feet. Another nice progression you can use is going into anterior tilt. Anterior tilt will increase the stretch going down through the back of the leg, and you can work here. And one of the last progressions that I'll use here, I would bring the head down into the middle of the shoulders. So I'm essentially in the type of a one-legged down dog pose. So from here, and I'm pushing through the heel against the floor. Bup, bup, bup. And the speed of the pulsing I'm looking for is like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's quite a quick tempo. If you were doing 100, it would probably only take you around 60 seconds. So it's less than a second for each pulsing action. It's a very, very effective movement if it's used daily. One thing, if you do feel you're not getting much out of it at all for the for the calf muscle, the regression would be to do a classic standing, like calf raised position. But again, you would use the pulsing. So if you're not quite sure what that is, essentially, I won't do it against a wall, but you would just use a step and you would have a wall in front of you. You would hold something and you would work here. And then you would just work on the one leg and you would do the pulsing on the one leg, just with your hands against the wall. 1, 2, 3. This foot would not be on the floor. It's just because I don't have a wall. But 1, 2, 3, 4. And you would work the pulsing in this position. But the floor is so convenient and it's always available there that this is why I choose personally the floor calf pulses. Last thing, the position of the knee. Because we're working on development of the posterior chain, which includes the tendons of the back of the knee, where possible, if it's not too unstable or if there's no pain, try to keep the leg completely locked out. And when I say locked out, I mean not only that the knee is locked out, I mean that also the quadricep is also tight and flexed. That whole leg is tight. And it was just mentioned that someone also felt it in the hamstrings. Yes, most definitely, you'll feel it in the hamstrings. But what you'll also notice is when you adjust the position of your pelvis, that you can put the stretch into different places. This in general is also something I want to emphasize, all these types of movements is, again, it's in the perspective of practice. This is the investigation. I've just talked, God knows how long, about a movement in which you pulse your calf. How can I talk about this unless I've had some experience with just such a simple movement frame? And I encourage you to do the same. I mentioned a friend previously who he's just started, his movement perspective is changing, and he's now starting to, notice stuff that when he contracts his hand in a particular way, or when he does something slightly with a different position of the hip, or when he focuses and does different works movements at different angles. You don't have to become, for example, a movement doctor looking into everything, but just be curious and reflect on the effects. Oh, I felt that in my hamstring as well. Interesting. I wonder if it changes if I move slightly here. And then if you need more stretch in the hamstring, then you have another tool. You have a small variation, just that to your body, that you can twist in this way, and it gets it right at that point. This is exactly what I spoke about last time with, where are you? As opposed to the idea of know yourself, because you're always changing. How can you know something that's never fixed and concrete? Know where you are. Like at this point in time, in this movement, I feel it in the hamstring. 6 months later, you may not feel it in the hamstring at all. And then reflecting, you can think, my hamstring mobility is improved, but my calf mobility still needs development. Okay. There's also a reason that I put this before the squat routine, is because many people with the squat routine, the initial instance, of course, if you're restricted in the squat, one of the telltale signs is either, of course, that you have a problem with just sitting on the heat, sitting flat, it doesn't work, or that you can sit flat, but you constantly feel like you're falling backwards. Feels like you're falling backwards, okay? So just before I jump into the squat, which is, I'm probably going to spend a lot of time with the squat routine. Any questions about the calf pulsing? Any issues? Like that?
Jay, I have a question.
Yeah. Is that Jeff?
Yeah. Hey, man.
Hey, how's it going?
So this isn't necessarily about the calf pulsing specifically, but I think one of the things that I've run into with my mobility is running into scar tissue. And you talked a little bit about it last and in college, and I don't know that much about that topic.
Me neither.
Do you recommend different protocols if I'm running? Because the scar tissue that I have by my pubic bone and my adductors from injuries from soccer is a very different feeling than, the other stuff that I've done. So do you have any experience with that, or any recommendations on how to deal with that sensation that I'm feeling as far as pulsing or static or active or passive? I guess that's my question.
Yeah. I mean, like always, I won't be able to provide any solutions for your issue. I will be able to provide just some perspectives and some ideas. on the way that you can approach it. I spoke about this before, about this idea that a friend shared with me, which was the idea of movable and immovable injuries. So, for example, in some cases, like shoulder, I have a huge history of shoulder injuries from the age of. I had my first shoulder injury when I was 18, back in the bodybuilding days. Really bad shoulder injury, but also in trauma as well. I've had trauma in shoulder injuries. I've fallen on from a backflip onto my shoulder. Also, all subluxations, never full dislocations, just kind of this is my constant thing. And what I found when I started specifically working with the shoulder a lot, and I mentioned this as well, it's in one of the books that I mentioned, is that the shoulder socket itself is malleable. So speaking from my specific experience with the shoulder, is that it changes so much over time, that things that at one point feel like an immovable restriction, ultimately they become something different. You won't always have, this full range that, you would ideally love to have to be able to do back walkovers and things, but it changes to a point where your movement habits adapt to it and you find a way. With regards to your specific injury with the hamstring and the tendons of the hamstring, those are big old tendons, and it's not uncommon. I assume you're speaking in relation to somewhere high up where it connects with the kind of basically your sitting bone.
It's more in my pancake. I mean, when I'm in my pancake, it's more in my adductors, the insertion of my by my pubic bone, where it feels like concrete. And I've had other experiences where that concrete eventually turns into gravel and then it starts to soften. But man, my pancake is just taking a significantly different amount of time than other things.
As I said, because this is also, we can class it quite easily as like a potent tool, the pancake. It works, but it can also exist, as I said before, if you have something pre-existing, it can be the worst thing for you. It can be the worst thing for you. So there's two things I would suggest, first of all. On exercise selection. The pancake isn't the only movement that is going to be able to develop your posterior chain range. And there's other ones that are less intrusive. For example, in the video resource that I provided with the calf pulses, there's also a movement which is very simply called the single-legged good morning. This has a similar effect, although it's working more in a pike position rather than an open straddle position. So it doesn't carry the same benefits of actually opening up, this V position of the straddle. But in terms of generally your posterior chain, it will have some similar effects, and it's working with this pulsing, but it's less intrusive. On more the actual physiological level with the issue, I'm not the type of person who will always give, this is the solution that you have to do this, this, and this. But I will say, most definitely, if you haven't already, soft tissue work on scar tissue, if it hasn't been heavily invested in, whether that's, from someone else or yourself, whether it's using, home maintenance protocols like your foam rolling, like whether you're using like a ball or anything else like that, invest in this daily. Daily. And I don't just mean in the area. I mean, for example, if it's, high up in here or anywhere here, you want to be working over the entire hamstring. You want to be working over quad. You want to be working over IT band. You want to be working over your glute. You want to be spending at least 20 minutes, a good 4 or 5 days a week invested in that. And I'm also a firm believer that energy, man, we cannot deny that energy exists, whatever form you choose to look at it in. If you are giving your injured area more attention that associates with, it's energy, like Ido actually mentioned it before, like obsess over your injuries. You should be obsessed with it every single day. Not a day goes by when I don't think about my left shoulder and my right pronator teres, even though this one's like pretty much gone. And my shoulder rarely gives me problems, but I always do something for it every day because it's my baby. I take care of it. It's a little bit damaged. It needs its attention, and I give it. If I forget about it, what happens if you have someone that's close to you that needs help and you forget about them? Not nice stuff normally, They need that attention. And this over time, this culmination of attention to your injuries in general, first of all, psychologically, will help you accept them in a positive light. I mean, think about it. Very often we think of injuries in such a negative light. Like, and you know, they did these experiments with the plants that you shout bad things at the plants every day. And I don't know if this is true, but the plant dies or something terrible, you know? It's the same idea. If you're like, oh, you always see this, like, people are, don't hate your injuries. It's you. It's your movement past. Like, you don't have to be proud of it and stuff, but learn from it and take care of it and nurture it the best that you can. And keep in mind that it may be something that you'll have to just deal with and accept because it may be with you for the rest of your life. This is the way it is. However, at the same time, unless you invest in a plan, you know, an action plan that you think over the course of time is going to help it, unless you invest in that continuously, you will never know. So invest more, take these other protocols into account. I would always take soft tissue massage and things like this as a first point protocol and something daily if there is, you know, existing continuing issues with pain, especially around the sites of tendons. Work with some of these movements, being sensitive to the areas that, you know, is this a good idea at the moment or not? Again, in some cases, the only reason you generally learn that is if you go a bit too far. So again, this is also the process. This is the learning process with regards to injury. Okay.
Yeah. I think one of the things is it's so intense that I'm having trouble figuring out if I should continue to go because is this good or is it bad? And I've been hesitant to go past that point. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say if it gets to the point, whenever you're questioning and you're not sure, you don't have enough information to know, is this movement good for me or not? As I said, the other idea is then to question, okay, is this movement the only way that I can develop this range? As we said, you don't need to worship the movement. Oh, Pancake, I have to do Pancake if I want. It's like, no, there's many other ways. You know, as I say, there's many ways to skin a cat. Unless you're doing the movement, skin the cat. There's only one movement. And then one of my friends, a good friend from Bulgaria, turned around and said, even this is not true. Oh, yeah, you're right, actually. You can do skin the cat in more than one way. So if you're looking for a range, it's not just one tool. And especially if that tool is taking you to a place where you're not sure if it's good for you or not, I would say that's a good sign to drop that movement, try a variation of it, and investigate other movements that work into the same range, and then make an educated decision afterwards. Keep in mind, this is a process that, especially depending upon your injury, is a years-long process. I'm not talking about, like I said, I injured my shoulder the first time when I was 18. I'm now 32 years old. And I'm still working it out and finding better stuff and doing different stuff, but I do it. And that's how I hold myself together. And I'm not held together with toothpicks. At the moment, I'm held together quite well. And I think that anyone that brings themselves to a point where they come to full rehabilitation of injury through their own efforts, it should be something you're proud of, because it's something that you took into your hands. You know, even if you have a physio, unless you have, you know, a physio visiting you every day and doing all these things for you, it's in your hands, just like your own movement practice. So if you're practicing and you're overcoming and you're achieving, you know, this is your own doing. Likewise, if you don't progress and you don't do anything, it's also your own doing. So which one can you accept?
Great, man. Thank you.
No worries. Good. I'll run straight into the squat routine. Once again, this squat routine in part is taken from some really nice tools, very popular tools shared by Ido Portal. Also a guy called Dewey Nielsen, who is now, I believe he works with Andrea Spina with the FRC project, the Functional Range Conditioning. They have a lot of their perspectives on mobility and developing the usability of your ranges. I'll go straight in. As I said, if you've got issues with your squat that you cannot sit flat-footed, as I demonstrated in the video, just put something under the back of your feet. Keep it minimal. If you have this sensation of falling back, it should still be there slightly throughout the routine. And this is, again, coming to a point where, you know, should I progress or should I not? Sometimes you just have to take the jump and just go, okay, I'm going to do the routine without anything under my feet. I will say that if you're doing the routine here, it's not the same effect as if you're using elevation. Why? We have two different squats. This is an active squat. in all reality, for moving, an active squat is way more useful than a passive squat. Yeah, passive squat. I was in the woods a couple of days ago. Passive squat is for pooing in the woods. Passive squat is for also gambling. Passive squat is also when you're sitting around smoking outside the back of the warehouse. Okay, this is passive squat. Active squat here is for moving. If I want to move suddenly, I don't want to be sitting passive flat on my feet. I want active squat. However, if I'm working to develop my hip mobility, I need something in between, if not flat foot squat. Why? Because if I can sit in a flat-footed squat and I can bring myself just a bit active, it doesn't need to be back squat active, but bring myself a bit active, I'm going to create more torque in the hips, like this twisting motion. And for me, a lot of this hip mobility routine is developing this idea of being able to create more range in the hip through torque. It's this idea of the knee coming backwards to this position. And as you see, for example, if you're a practitioner in types of martial arts where you're on the floor, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you want to get having this range, being able to pull inside and produce force from here, can be very, very useful, whether it's just holding a structure or producing force. So where possible, get yourself to the floor. As I said, one of the reasons that you can get the feeling of falling back is related to here as well. But if it's connected to the dorsiflexion of the foot, then doing the calf pulses before is going to give you as much dorsiflexion as you have currently to facilitate you in the squat routine. If you are just in active squat in a way that you're just on your toes, this does not really facilitate the torquing of the hip. It's just not there. So either sit on something so your body weight is down, or if it's possible, flat foot on the floor. I also recommend for this particular routine, if you're not able to do it all the way through yet without standing up, this should be your benchmark. Your benchmark to do the routine beginning to end without exiting the squat. This is not the idea of no pain, no gain. Yeah. This is not what we're working with. The perspective is, unless you actually have injuries in your knees and you're feeling, the old MCL tear, this is okay. You need to calm down and maybe take it easy. But if you have no history of like extreme knee issues or pain, and it's not a direct pain, it's probably just discomfort. Two things that are happening here. You're in, as far as it will allow you, the most flexed position of your knee. So if you have tightness, this goes for the elbows as well in deep flexion. If you have tightness around here, whether it's to do with the fascia or the tendons or muscles holding a lot of tone, it's a loaded stretch. It's a loaded stretch for the connective tissue here. You have your body weight. You're in a position of deep flexion. It's facilitated by your body weight. For me, this is a loaded stretch. So there's this element. Of course, it feels very stressful in the knees and things like this. Second element is also you're very constricted in this position. Your blood vessels are constricted in such a way that, of course, it makes it difficult in some cases to remove buildups of toxins such as lactic acid, et cetera, that cause this sensation of, oh my God, I need to stand up. Here's the thing. As I said, in the absence of, histories of MCL, ACL tear and things like this, in the absence of pain, just stay down. Just stay down in the squat. Breathe deeply. Your body will adapt. You are also adapting the vessels in the legs and the capillaries to be able to deliver oxygen and to be able to remove waste products. This goes the same for the dragon squat. This is why I say, where possible, twist up the dragon squat, because it's going to develop adaptations in your legs as well to be able to remove the toxins. And this is applicable for anything, You can make an argument that it could help improve your how many reps you could do for a back squat, for example, that it can improve your anaerobic capacity too. So these are just things to keep in mind, and why I would say if you can't stay in the squat for the whole routine at the moment, make it your benchmark. First things first, okay? The first movement that we're going to do, I'll just speak quickly about positioning of the feet again. As I said, where ideal, keep the feet to around 15 degrees outwards. If you're at 45 degrees or more outwards, bring them in a bit if you can, but again, don't force anything. I played with this routine for a good few months, working with feet at, completely parallel, just to see what extra range I got. What I got in return was knee pain. So I was going into a range that was something, whether we want to talk about natural or not, it wasn't necessary. So 15 degrees is good. If you find yourself really out here like this, just be aware that you're super tight in your glutes, essentially, or all the other external rotator muscles that are involved with that. I invite you now just to bring yourself into a squat and go through the routine with me. If you don't want to, no problems whatsoever, but just keep this in mind. The chest stays upright all the time. I think that I'm trying to stay proud. For the first movement, I put the shoulder into the knee. I open the chest and I push outwards as far as I can. Benchmark for this first movement is straight elbow if it's possible. Don't let the shoulder drop in here. Keep the shoulder back. It will increase the range. I pulse for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I hold it. 4, 5. And I'm going to hold it for the 10 seconds. So we've got pulsing and then we've got the isometric. I keep the chest up. I twist. The shoulder goes into knee. Open the chest. Push outwards as much as possible. If it doesn't go at all, you can even just use the elbow. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You hold it for the 10. Even if you're like up here, some people, not a problem. You can still work this. The time and the position is fine. Good. Now, the next movement we work with is the knee collapse. Now, try to keep your body forward. The knee goes out. And I actively rotate it inwards. It turns on the ball of the foot. The heel is in the air. Now, one thing I want to try to avoid too much is this. The compensation of turning of the torso. Because if you think about it, now I'm not really getting actually any internal rotation. Because if I look at you from the forward, my leg just went forward. It didn't go inward. Try to keep the upper body facing straight forward. We'll just take a few more reps here. Pulling inward. I actively pull outwards and then pull inward. Pulling outwards, pulling inward. And I'm mapping the ball of the foot here as well. Let's say I've gone for 10. We more or less have. We take to the other leg, pushing outwards, turning on the ball of the foot inwards. At the same time, as I said, I'm mapping the ball of the foot against the floor. Pushing outwards, keeping yourself as tall as possible. If there are huge restrictions with this, you can most definitely use your hands on the floor. This is not a problem. You can even have the hands slightly behind, or you can have them to the front. No issues with that whatsoever. Okay. Now we work through these two movements. We're now going to work with, these may be slightly mixed up, but it's all the same idea, with the Buddha prayers. One really important thing for this particular movement, the elbows are coming inside the knees here. Very often you'll find people like, look at this. I'm doing the max progression with my fists. No, you're not. The idea of the movement is that the elbows increase the range for you. So keep the elbows inside. This is the truth I was talking about. Start with the clasped hands. And likewise, if your hands are out here, you're also not getting the range. Bring the hands close to the chest and work it down here. Keep the chest high. We're going to work just for 5 more reps, and then I'll hold it for 5. As I said, the progression for this is using the fists if you're there, keeping the chest up. I hold it for the 10 seconds for the isometric. And then what I do from here, I give myself some respite, a little rest. Seems like it's not. As I come back, and I work with the hip rotation. I'll work this at a slight angle so you can see. Again, I'm mapping the ball of the foot. This is something that becomes important in the future, but for now, this is the idea. I pull outwards, the heel comes up. If I can't touch, it's not a problem.
Try not to come flat on the heel, because here is what we're looking for. That's external rotation. If you haven't got the whole range, no problem. Just pull into the range, hold it for a second, come back. Again, here, the heel comes up. Once again, for your structure, you may need to have a little adjusting. So maybe you're here, maybe you bring it closer here. I would just say with this movement, just stay a bit active in the shoulders, that you're not just kind of sinking down here like an old sack of potatoes. So I've worked this leg, I go straight into the other leg, heel up, opening out, pulling it in. Once again, I'm trying to reduce the movement of my, my pelvis, because I want to twist inside the hip socket here. Outwards, inwards, pulling. The goal is to try and kiss the knee, keeping the heel high. When I come back into the movement, we're going to go into our sky reaches or an elbow reach. There's a reason I gave two variations for this movement, because very many people, they work with the arm version. It looks really nice, right? But what can actually happen is people get distracted by the hand. So they're working in this position and they, you know, they've got the hand back here and it's like, oh, it's just going great. It's like, well, no, you're actually more just pointing the hand backward and it's not actually happening down here. It can be a distraction. So I advise people in the initial instance to work with just the elbow. Push the knees out. Now with this movement, I'm actually, why is it different to the push away? Because we have this added idea of torque through the torso. There's a twisting, there's a twisting, there's a twisting. This is why I advise people to hold the ankle as well. A cue that you can use is trying to get this elbow deeper to the floor. So even if you're up here, you're thinking, okay, elbow down, get in there, knees out, push them out. So down here, I reach up, I pull the elbow back, I come down, I try to touch the floor, I come back up. I'm using this for some assistance. Now and then, I kind of shimmy my way to get in it a bit deeper as I bring it up. A visual cue we're looking at is alignment from elbow, shoulder, shoulder, elbow. This would be a great model, yeah? In some cases, depending on restriction, what you'll see is like, you know, this is the people just kind of bring their hand back here. But no, we want this alignment that comes through as we work this movement. Now, as we go into the isometric, you hold the arm. In some cases, you can feel with the arm that it gives you a bit more torque. It's up to you. You hold for the 10 seconds. We go straight in and we change to the other side. I use my shoulder to kind of like nudge it open a bit, nudge it, hold here, pulling the elbow towards the ground. And again, we're working again. We'll do the full reps. 1, 2. If I'm working with the hand, go 3. If you're working with the arm, it's an unfolding. It goes duck, duck, duck. It doesn't go immediately, but there's a sequence of events that follows the unraveling of the upper body, which it facilitates the torque that we're speaking about. We'll call that 9 and we'll come back into 10. We'd hold it for the 10. Also, just some small tips with this. You don't need to, like, you know, tweak your neck out. You can just relax the neck and just here it's more about getting into this deep position. Good. We come back out. We go straight into the bowing. Now, this is a really, really great movement that actually I would advise you that if you have issues with the squat, this is one of the movements that over time will gradually give you, more range and works more with this torquing of the hip idea I was talking about when it's the Buddha bows. So from here, again, in order to give myself more space in the middle, and this goes for your back squatting and your front squatting as well, by the way, get the knees out. Yeah. If I'm front squatting and I'm still using this traditional idea of my knees tracked directly forward, like good luck having a good, decent back squat with any good weight. Like you look at any good heavy lifters, what happens when they come down? They create space. You get space and the body comes down in the middle. And now I can sit in the hole here, as opposed to, classic fitness squat where I come back here. And essentially what ends up happening is I'm subject to the mobility with my dorsiflexion. Actually, if I don't have dorsiflexion, then I end up, my bottom part of my back squat looks like a Romanian deadlift.
which is working more on my back. So the same with this particular movement here. We're going into the bows, get the knees out. Start with a target. You must have a target. Even if you're really restricted, you can use you can headbutt your fist, use that, okay? Give yourself something measurable so you know over time, wow, like I was here and now I'm here. This is progress. This is motivating. As I come to this position, again, we're working in the end range. You don't need to, full on bow and come up. You stay in the end range. So for example, if I'm here, I'm going to be working like this. 1, 2, 3. It has the same tempo of pulsing as the pancake, the same tempo of pulsing as the calf pulses. And we're working with this idea in the end range. If I feel myself getting more range, I push the legs out even more. And this is the torque position I'm talking about. This will give you, for me, I have found the most available range in your squat in general. More than just, opening the hips out this direction. This direction is where most people are the most restricted. Getting down between the legs. This will improve the mobility for your back squat, the mobility for your front squat. There's another way that you can do this slightly. Now, when you're doing this in the routine, I don't want your butt to be rising because this is the compensation, okay? So the butt, if it comes up a little bit, okay? If it facilitates, remember, the same as we said with the rounded back and the pancake, if this compensation facilitates you getting a better outcome, go with it for the beginning. But just be aware that in the model, we're looking for no rising of the backside. It just kind of comes down to here. If you want to take this out and use it specifically for example, before you do back squats or front squats or something like this, you can take it again to the 50 to 100 pulses, much more than the 10 pulses and 10-second hold. And what you can do, we use the form slightly differently. What I personally do, I get the person to lean forward a bit more here, and then you work with an up and down pulse in this particular direction. Rather than the bowing this way, or bring you up, the person can even use the hands on the floor, and it's just this position. And again, it's just the pulsing. Bub, 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 bub. And if we want elasticity anywhere, we're talking about elasticity in the knees and the hip joints and everything, and being able to use this as a spring, okay? So with this particular position, I would work again, start with 25, but you can work more. You can work it to 50 and even up to 100. That's if you want to take that specifically out of the squat routine. I think that's pretty much the squat routine all in all, to be honest. Any questions about squat routine, or did I leave anything out of the squat routine anyone wants to mention? No, good. We've got the last 10 minutes, so I'm going to quickly go through two movements. And I may just go 5 minutes over, but they're quite important. It's relating to this last part, which is emptying and softening. And before I go into this idea of emptying and softening, I want to just comment that, as I said already, no movement belongs to anything. So when someone says, no, that movement's from this, you can't do that. What are you talking about? It's a movement. No one owns this. Many people have said this before, like no one can own a movement. It's completely applicable to the context. But for example, if I go to a capoeira roda and I start rolling around on the floor, this is not the right movement. You're in the wrong place doing the wrong thing, sir, and you have to respect that. You shouldn't really go to a weightlifting gym dedicated to weightlifting and start perhaps maybe, bouncing a ball against a tennis ball. It isn't perhaps not the right place for it. Just the same as, this exists. This is the social policing of movement. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means that certain spaces, you're allowed to move in a certain way and some places not. And we see this now, of course, very, very strongly when we have, essentially a worldwide emergency in which we need to respect these things. But this is present in everything. So in saying this, that no movement belongs to a specific discipline or context or has a specific use, it's only contextual. The movements that I want to quickly look at, the single leg balance and hip rotation and the kidney taps. The seated floor entrance and exit is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll go through it quickly. you won't really know what the context is at the beginning. This is why it can be a type of movement that I just leave that one out. I don't do it because I'm not sure what the context is and I'm not sure what it's for. So the context I've given you in the beginning is that it's for emptying of the legs, so to get rid of some tension through your training session, and emptying and softening of the arms. Yeah, many people can, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, soften it. We just made it hard. And, yeah, okay, we soften it. This is good, but it's not for that. It's not for anything. But what I'm trying to say is it goes a lot further than this. There are many other things, but actually they won't become of interest or use to you unless you A, have a previous experience in using these types of movements, or B, if you really, really invest in it. So for example, the single leg balance and hip rotation. We'll start with that first of all. So the progressions at the beginning are essentially just standing on one leg. This is something I encourage for anyone with your practice. Unilateral balance. You cannot get enough of unilateral balance practice on one leg, whether it's with your eyes open or closed. Like I think every human being, no matter what age, should be able to stand on one leg for 60 seconds. Especially if you're an elderly population. If you're unable to do this, it's something that you can focus on immediately to help improve your confidence in your general balance and your walking, your general movement ability. So of course, the first progression is quite simply standing on the one leg. You stand on it, balance for 1 minute, shouldn't kill you. I stand, I balance, okay. I stand, I balance on the other leg, 1 minute, no problem, good. What I've actually given you here is working more specifically for 2 minutes, which is more with a rotational element. You can choose to do just the balanced ones, and you can do the eyes closing, you can do the looking from the side, looking up and around and back. Use all these tools. But what I'm really interested in is this idea of the hip rotation. What does this actually mean? It actually means that my body is facing forward here, and watch the hip angle. The hip opens here. It's not necessarily at the moment a turning of the pelvis. At the moment, it's just the hip opening and closing this way. So first of all, I just start with this idea. This is one perspective of this movement. And as you can see, the movement, although it seems like it's coming from the foot, of course it doesn't come from the foot, it comes somewhere else. But I think in my mind that I'm drawing a little figure 8 with my foot, just like this. And the foot itself is pretty much dead. I try to work with as little tension as possible, and that goes for the standing leg as well as the other leg, and the movement's just happening here in the hip. And this is how I start. This, of course, we're working on the balance and everything like this, but actually there's something interesting happening here. This is one movement, only happening in the hip. Now, if we start to open the hip, what I'm now looking at now, I'll show you from the front, this is actually a different movement, but from here, the hip opens. I showed this actually as a progression with the hip, with the reaching, but watch the hip opens this way. The effect when I do this here is that the hip opens here. This leg stays forward and it opens. So now I can just start working with this idea. So I have the one from before, which is this little figure 8, and now I have this idea of kind of it just opening and closing. And I can explore different textures of this. I can explore a texture when this leg just stays forward and I open my whole body out, or I can explore a texture where it has more of a torque in the knee about it, like this. And whenever you get ACL or MCL injuries, it's not from shearing, it's from torque. It's the twisting and your ACL goes. So if we can this is just a little stimulus just for this torquing that we're building in the leg here. Now, as I start to develop this, as I start to increase the motion, as long as I don't put too much intention, for example, in the knee, like, oh yeah, the knee is doing the work, the knee's not doing the work, or the foot is doing, no, the foot's not doing the work. This is what I mean by, now, what is the context? Where is it coming from? How does this movement get expressed? And what I start to find is there's an oscillation that starts to happen You can even do it if you just have the toe on the floor. You can start to feel, this is connecting with this, and this actually is connected with the floor. Everything is incorporated in creating this movement. And I have this torsion effect in the transverse plane that, for example, when I pull this, I pull it back. What is a kick or a punch if not a body torsion with a potato on the end, as Ido Portal put it? It's the same as here. What is the kick? And it pulls it around. And this is the world that it starts to go into if you really dig deep and start investing in it. I'm not saying this is going to make you a better kicker and a better puncher. I'm not saying this at all. I'm not even from this world of martial arts. But what I am saying is that there's a fundamental concept there. And this is the thing that can serve you in movement research for a very, 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 very long time. I've been working with these movements for years, and they teach me something every single time, something new about myself and about the movement context. Again, this is not a place where you have to go. It depends upon you. What this eventually, this particular context comes into, my girlfriend let me know that if I use the arms in a particular way like this and with the shoulder, this is the same movement from salsa that they use. Okay, so, but what I'm using the arms for now is just a counterbalance. So I'm working this direction, I'm letting the hip move. I try to stay as light and dead as possible in the leg. Now, for example, I can work this to the front of me here. I can also bring it right back to the side as I start working with this. One thing I can also bring this to, I can even make it more of a balance and correctional drill. If I just take it as wild as possible, and I try to put myself out of balance. I try to put myself so I have to correct. If I lose it, I lose the game. It's just a game. But the way that we're going to structure this for the 2 minutes is just when it gets tired, you change foot. It starts to fatigue a bit. Okay, I work with this, I change foot. In the beginning, it's just balance. Second phase, exploring. What is this connection between the upper and the lower body? The third stage, more dynamic. The fifth stage, you go mental with it and you can use it as a type of balance drill as well. So yeah, this particular movement, it will reveal many, many things to you. First of all, it will reveal any deficiencies in balance on one leg, unilateral balance. But thirdly, then it will challenge you conceptually. There's one thing I've learned about studying this subject movement is that principles and concepts are much, much more powerful than individual movements. Like if you can understand or try, even if it's not, even if you only understand it in the way that you think about it, if you have a concept is always more powerful than an individual tool. You can build tools and other things around concepts. When you just have a tool, we're actually reverse engineering here. We're trying to get to a concept through the tool, but I'm telling you, first of all, that this is a useful concept. One last thing, a visual cue that you can work with for this idea of the upper body and I say the lower, I'm talking about the torsion happening here through the spine. So when I'm working like this, it comes delayed. One idea, which also ties into the next movement, is this toy. When you have like a little drum and a stick, and it has 2 strings and 2 balls on the end, and you go tick 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 tick. This is the aspect of physics that we're working with. This is the idea. This is how people do crazy flips and create kinetic potential through the torsion between their upper and lower body. This is how Lionel Messi, develops the power for his football kicks. It happens throughout the ruler. We can create this in the body, and we're just exploring it through this small movement frame. And the second one that we're similar, but without the balance aspect, that you're working with the upper body, is again the kidney taps. Also in your morning practice, which you won't have time to go through today, I've already gone over time. Again, One way we can facilitate the understanding of this movement frame, the arms are completely dead. So as I said in the beginning, I'm proposing this to you as emptying and softening the arms, but there is something more to it. I keep the feet well planted. I'm very conscious of how my feet are. In this particular context, try to keep the feet facing forward and have the weight evenly through the ball of the foot, so near the front behind the toes, and also the heel of the foot, as well as the big toe and the toes themselves. You shouldn't feel too much that anything is carrying too much weight. The standing position here, it's a slight posterior tilt, but it's not full on like this. I just sit down and I think of imagining, I try to keep in alignment the crown of my head, my tailbone going down in between my feet. It's quite a soft position here. I try to release any unnecessary tension that I'm feeling first of all here. Okay, and then I work with the turning. Now, in the first instance, work with the idea that the arms do not lead the movement. What does this mean? It means if you think the arms are leading the movement, essentially what happens is this becomes the end of the chain and then pulls everything else along with it. So this ends up being the result. People kind of flying all the way through the air, the spine is waving around. No. As I mentioned with this line that goes from here out through your tailbone to the middle of the floor, imagine it as a stick. And you're stuck on a stick, and now you're really like this toy I spoke about. It stays locked forward. And I explore how do I create this expression of kinetic potential in the arms with the most minimal movement from the center here, which is essentially the center of my structure in conjunction with the floor, is creating this kinetic potential. And I just work with this idea. You can change the frequency of the movement. One important thing to take notice of is my knees as they're facilitating the action. This is a full body movement. It's not just isolated to the upper body. I use a slight up and down, just a slight up and down. I'm always aware of my feet in contact with the floor. And one target I often give myself, and this is why it's called kidney taps, is just that the hands come just to tap round about here. And this makes sure that I'm not, for example, going wild up here. I'm not kind of hanging too low. It's not so strict as that. It's just a guideline. And I work with this idea. Now, again, over time, as I start to explore this more and more, what I start to find is that actually this expression of the arms is just an expression. And if something else is actually moving this, not the arms, then I should be able to express it somewhere else, like here. This is actually exactly the same movement. It's just they're being expressed differently through the arms. I can express it here. This is why it's completely fundamental. I can express it here, which is also in the movement. I can express it here. I can express it here. It's so central to movement of the body through space that it's something that you can spend so much time on, years on, and always find something new. So as I said, the context that I've given you, this kidney taps and this hip movement drill, is in the idea of softening and emptying these parts of the body. But be curious for the deeper thing if that's something that interests you. If not, perfect. It will be good for just loosening some of the tension, but there is something else that you can dig deeper into. Now, I would like to quickly spend 5 minutes on the seated floor entrance and exit, but we have already gone 5 minutes over time. Just let me know if you're okay to stick around for another 5 or 10 minutes to go through that. You can just write in the comment box if there's any issues. It's okay for you, no problem, no problem. Yeah, all good. Yeah. Saurabh came really late, so he's happy for us to stay another 5 minutes. You're the last. You missed it. It's all good. Okay, good. So I'll quickly go through, and it is nice that I can go through this because, again, this is one of those movements, the floor entrance and exit that I'm talking about now. And I had a bit of a hard time. I really wanted to put floor entrance and exit in here because it's such a fundamental introduction to contact with the floor. But I had to think to myself, how do I sell it to you in the right package? Just as I had to, sell this movement of the arms as, emptying and softening, which it is good for. I had to think, okay, now I think floor entrance and exit, this can go softening. So again, we approach it from the perspective that it's for softening the body in relation to the floor. But of course, there's many other cool things in there. The floor entrance and exit, we're doing it from seated. You can also do it from squat, but I advise you to do it from seated first of all. And the reason is because one of the main things about this movement that we're looking for is quality. Now, I already spoke about this issue of the word quality. It's thrown around, you do it with quality, good quality. But I like to use the term of quality that was proposed by Shai Farhan. And she said that quality is, did you do what you meant to do? You had an idea, I'm going to do this beautiful movement, I'm going to enter and exit the floor fantastically. Yeah, did it look like that? If not, then you did not meet your own model. We've come to this term already. You didn't meet the model, therefore the quality was not so good. But I would propose that this then calls upon us to understand, okay, what do I want to do? So did you do what you wanted to do? No, first, what did I want to do? So here's what we want to do with this movement. We're looking for a texture. I spoke about this already. The texture we're looking for is between soft and firm, like bamboo. And the reason I say this, not just softness, is because what can happen is, this is soft. It's not what we're looking for. Not what we're looking for. Okay. There's no firmness to it. There's no structure to it. It's just like pouring, a glass of orange juice on the floor, rather than pouring a glass of orange juice into some kind of intricately made bottle, and it looks, wow, that's interesting. Okay. So in order to give ourselves some more shape, starting from the floor here, one of the most important things we'll speak about the floor entrance and exit, because it's the same, and also it ties in with the action of the pisiform that I mentioned with the high bridge rotation. There's a sequence of events which we'll call 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, which is easy. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. Interestingly, this is also a structure one of my martial arts teachers uses in order to discuss locking of the arms, working with the wrist and with the elbow, then with the shoulder. So there's connections with this idea. Now I'm starting from seated. I'm just in a comfortable seated position on the floor. I enter with the pisiform. Remember the hard part of the hand from the bridge rotation? I enter from here. There's not so much disruption with the fingers. I enter in. I bring the elbow in, and I bring myself to a sleeping position. And this is the visualization we'll work with. The reason I like this visualization is because one of the most common problems you'll see in the beginning with this floor entrance and exit is blocking yourself. And it's such an interesting response because you block yourselves in movement in many ways, in hesitation, as I mentioned already, by not in the bridge, not putting your hand back far enough. You can block yourself in many ways, but people do it so obviously with this movement, is when they put their hand here and they try to go into the floor, but look at the position of my elbow. How does my body, I can put all my body weight, it doesn't even go to the floor because the elbow is in a weird position. The elbow needs to be in here. So I enter the floor, I turn on the pisiform, the elbow comes into my side, and now I'm in the sleeping position. I roll to the other side, and then I repeat the process. So showing you there from the back, I place the hand, the elbow comes in, I'm coming towards the side. I roll from one side of the back to the other side, and it's a mirror image on the other side, just in reverse. And this movement, this drill, for example, if you if you are a teacher and you teach elderly people, what better movement to teach them than how to get up from the floor if they're on the floor? If they fall and they have to get up, because it doesn't require strength. And this is the idea. If you are doing this movement and it feels difficult, is because you're thinking about sit-ups, and it's not a sit-up. So a very common thing, number 2, that happens. People come here and it's like, sit up. I come to the other side and I go, It is not. Floor contact movement, we go straight in with the idea of efficiency. So stuff I mentioned to you before about when something's less efficient and we can take the training benefit from this. I would say I use this a lot with locomotion. I give people patterns, and it's conditioning at the beginning of their practice. They do these patterns because they won't be able to do it properly, first of all, but they'll get a great conditioning effect through it. Floor work is not one of these things at all. You go straight in for the efficiency. You go straight in for the softness. You go straight in for the quality. So the quality here, once you have the sketch of the movement, it's like, I'm entering the floor, the elbow's in the right position, I come back out. I'm not moving my feet, because the feet are the markers for my movement. I don't want to suddenly bring the feet out here at the moment. Beginning, I don't know where I am. Yeah, this is okay. Now you have to identify where are the improvement areas. Where are the areas that I need to soften? So the easiest way you can tell this is you think about ironing. You're ironing something out, right? And there's a dual effect to this, because if you're ironing and there's a crease and you don't notice the crease and you keep ironing over it, people are going to laugh at you next day in the office. There's a crease on this guy's shirt. He didn't even realize he was ironing over a crease. Okay, so with this idea, the only way you can know is if you slow down. And I don't mean super slow motion, but I mean that savor the movement. I mentioned this before about savoring the movement. So I come down here, I notice, that was something. I don't stop myself, but I remember it for the next repetition. I think, this is dropping every time. And I come up and it comes down. It's making this sound, and same the other side when I come up. So I think, okay, next time, what can I do? It was enough for me just to think about it, and then it stopped. It was enough for me to think about it. So there must be another problem here. If I slow it down, hey, I feel like heavy coming into the floor. It feels like, what is this? Okay, so I do it again, and I think, okay, if I just turn a bit more to the side, it rolls in softly. And a very, very common one. Now I spoke about mapping the circle of the shoulders here. We can also map the lines. And now we're mapping the line across the back from shoulder to shoulder. Well, I should more accurately from one side of the back to the other, because it's not actually between the shoulders. There's a different place. But for example, I do my floor entrance here, and I come down. This seems okay. This thing keeps happening, and I can feel it. And all I keep thinking is, if I do this on concrete, it's not going to be so great. Very simple solution to this. You probably recognize it yourself. Slight protraction. A slight protraction and choosing a more favorable line on the back. So actually, when I said before about between the shoulders, this is not such a favorable line. For me, I'm giving you a tip here, maybe too much, but lower down on the back. So what I find now, instead of cutting like on the shoulders, here, slight adjustment. Not a sound. My left elbow then. And now here's the great thing. Once I start increasing the value of these things, I'm not just saying, oh yeah, it's fine. I just went in the floor and out. Yeah, this is fine if that's your model, but just be aware that the way that you move will represent your standards. Okay, so if you set for yourself a standard, like, no, I really want this to, we can use now aesthetics We can use it. We can say, I want it to look beautiful. I want it to look effortless. And then when you have this in your mind, it means that it comes from the intention. So you know what your intention is. So before, when I was just entering, perhaps I didn't even notice that my arm was entering heavy or things like this. But now that you bring it to the forefront, it changes then your standards of your movement. And that's why it's so important with something that's so simple, such as a floor entrance and exit, to really have a certain intention that you stick to. Or else it just becomes a movement, it doesn't make me stronger, it doesn't make me more mobile. I'll just leave that one out for now. Absolutely fine, it's your practice, but I share with you that it has something very, very valuable to add. And it's one of these movements, like all floor contact movements I've used, that you cannot practice it enough. You cannot practice it enough. The variations, as I've mentioned, opening and in the video, opening and closing of the legs. The last thing I'll say about that is that now that you have this intention of being soft and entering the floor, you will now find the pattern of the movement. Just as the rotational bridge is rotational, if I stick to the marks of, okay, I have to look at the hand, I have to turn the body, by sticking to this, you realize it's rotational. And the same, if I stick to this idea, it's rotational. If I stick to this idea of rotating the neck, it's rotational as I come back. Floor entrance, it falls around, and it allows me to follow the connect potential that is produced through the movements. This is a later stage, really, when you start connecting stuff together, but it's good to start trying to feel it in the initial instant. It's not just an exercise in the sense that I repeat it and it makes something better. It's something that you practice and it develops your understanding and you learn something, not about just this movement, but about all your other movements that follow in this particular theme as well. So with this floor entrance and exit, stay very, very curious with it. I personally, it was one of my first introductions to floor. One of them some years ago, and it continues to teach me things to this day. Anyone have any questions at all regarding the floor entrance and exit, or regarding anything else in general about the programming? Really taking almost 20 minutes extra of your time. Good. Anyone else? No. Awesome. Perfect. So just to let you know again, I will be popping this up on YouTube, and I'll send out a link to everyone. This, of course, if you haven't already got your programming and you would like to, just send me an email and I'll send you all the details. I will also send, as I did in the email before, a PayPal link if you would like to donate anything for this this seminar. It's completely free. It's not obligation whatsoever, but if you wanted to do that, that's available there. One last thing I'll say is that I'll message some people out in about 2 months' time, 2 or 3 months. As you may have noticed on this program, it says phase 1. The reason I put phase 1 there is because if it's something that, you know, this program is conducive to this current time, to our current movement environment, and we are always affected by our environment and the context that we live in. This is what affects our movement. So if you cannot move with the changes that happen around you, normally bad things happen in one way or another. Which is why this program as well, at some point, if the conditions of the way we are able to move change, then this program may find itself limited. It's only body weight. You only do it, you don't need much space. It doesn't use much big patterns and stuff like this, specifically because of the conditions that we're under. So a few months down the line, I'll send some emails out, and there may be a phase 2. Depends on what people are looking for. That's everything for me at the moment. I don't have anything else to share, so I just finished with a thank you for joining us for this second webinar. The first one is already up on YouTube if you missed it. And yeah, I was very surprised at the response to this. It was originally just for the movement practice burn group, and then people kept mailing in. So I think it's something that people are interested in, which means it's something they feel they need, which for me is not surprising because it's movement and everyone needs movement. You have to move. You don't have a choice. You have to move. However you choose to do it is your responsibility, but it has to be done. You can't live without it. It is what you live.